everyone. My name's Matthew O'Soul. I'm an assistant professor at CMU and with the Robotics Institute. And we'll be giving a presentation on why, what, and how of graduate school applications. So there's going to be a number of us that are going to be speaking about this. So we have Reina as well as Rishi on the call, who are also going to be giving short talks about different aspects of graduate school applications. Maybe both of you can give introductions about the type of work that you do and where you're at in your degree.
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Reina. I'm a first-year PhD. I am in the Transportation Bots and Disability Lab, and I work in HRI and accessibility technology.
Hello, everyone. I'm Rishi. I am a fourth-year PhD. I am working on robotic motion planning and multi-agent systems.
Great. Okay, thank you both. Let's get started. So this webinar is going to be about basically everything to do with applying to grad school and also getting an expectation as to what it's like being in grad school. So it's going to provide basically a very broad overview of what it's like to apply and what it's going to be like being a student. During the presentation, we have a few places where you can ask questions. We'll be monitoring that and answering questions at the end of our presentation. So if you have any questions, please feel free to chime in and we'll try to get through as many of those questions as possible. So I'll start off talking a little bit about why grad school, and we'll have a few other topics, how to apply, what it's like being in grad school, and then we'll try to get to your questions at the very end. All right, so let's get started. So when you apply to grad school, there's a couple of different options that you might have available to you. So first, there's a PhD, there's masters, and even in the masters, we can kind of categorize them as professional masters as well as research masters. So you have a few different options to choose from. And so you have to consider and weigh, what are the benefits and disadvantages of each of these programs. So when it comes to masters, every program is a little bit unique. Often these programs are self-funded, first of all, although there's always opportunities to get teaching assistantships or research assistantships that might help pay for parts of the program. Masters are usually on the shorter side. So for example, we have master programs that go from a year to 2 years, depending on exactly what the program's about. On top of that, it's when we kind of distill things down to professional masters and research masters, one thing to note about professional masters, it's much more course oriented. So those that are interested more in just building up the skills that they've learned during undergrad, maybe taking a few more courses, this is a good option, especially if you want to go straight into industry. Research masters places a little bit more emphasis on, research, right? So often in addition to classes, you might also have to write a thesis document, maybe publish some papers, work on different topics that might be a little bit more specific to the person that you might be working under. So for example, you might be paired up with a research advisor and they would direct you to do a particular work in a certain area, and you would build a thesis around that. So if you're to do a research master's, this is typically for those that are, interested in research. You may not know exactly what type of research you want to get into. You may not be ready to do a full-out PhD, but it's for those that want to kind of explore that aspect of education. And so if you're interested in going into a research job or continuing to do a PhD, but you feel like you don't have all the experience necessary to go into the PhD directly, a research master's may be one option for you. All right. Now for the PhD itself, of course, there's a bigger focus on doing research. This is over a 5 to 6 year long, timeline. So it's not a short stint of research, it's really kind of this really in-depth exploration of a particular space. In addition to doing research, you also get the opportunity to take some additional courses, often higher level courses that dig deeper into specific topics. You get opportunities to mentor certain students, So there might be undergrads interested in getting some research experience, may be able to work with them or work with others. You may have the opportunity to teach or TA courses. And like I was saying before, this is really good to set you up towards an academic career. Often, for those that have this research mindset, they might want to get into a research, industrial research position, or maybe stay in academia long-term, become a faculty member 6 years down the line. It is also nice because in addition to having the flexibility to explore certain topics, a PhD program is often funded. So it's the university that pays you as opposed to you paying the university. So you get a small stipend to cover the cost of living in a particular city. So that's yet another advantage to doing a PhD over a master's. Now, a PhD program is a much bigger commitment than doing a master's. So instead of 2 years of work, it's often 5, maybe 6 years, depending on the program or the university. And the first couple of years are usually dedicated to taking additional coursework, covering your breadth, doing some depth in terms of the type of area that you want to explore in more detail. After those first 2 years, then there's a much bigger emphasis on research. In addition to doing research over this period of time, you may be asked also to do teaching assistantships, so TAing for classes, and there's also qualifier exams, which at CMU would include doing a research qualifier, speaking qualifier, writing qualifier, at least in the Robotics Institute. So that's in your 3rd year. In your 4th year, you basically start thinking about putting a thesis proposal together, trying to think about basically writing a long document that details all the work that you've done over the course of these 5 years. And at the very end, you'll end up defending your thesis in front of a committee that will say yay or nay on the quality of your work. Now, given all these options, we provided a flow chart here that kind of helps you through exactly where you should think about applying. So for example, if you like working in a university, if you like the academic environment, then great, you should think about maybe doing a degree, graduate degree there. If you don't like the academic environment, maybe just go work for a little while. And if ever you're interested later on, you say, okay, this job's not for me. There's this topic that I wanted to explore some more, but I didn't really get an opportunity to do so when I was doing my undergrad. Hey, there's always an opportunity to go back to school. So it's not closing any doors here. You can always think about coming back to university later on. Now, the big question is, okay, do I want to develop my skills a little bit more for maybe an industry job, or do I want to think about, exploring kind of a particular topic really deep, getting into the weeds and thinking about research? So this is what will kind of differentiate between doing just a professional master's, which is much more heavy on courses, and then also doing a research-based master's and a PhD if you're interested in doing more research. Now, sometimes you may want to do a research program, but maybe you don't have the experience. Maybe you haven't actually dabbled in research all that much. Maybe your CV is not strong enough already. In which case, maybe a research-based master's is better suited for you. That way you have a couple of years to kind of build up your CV and then get yourself ready to, well, first of all, understand what research is like, and then have enough experience to say, okay, well, I'm going to commit to an additional 5 or 6 years to write a full thesis document. And in which case, if you're ready to do that, then PhD might be the right place to go. All right, with that, I think I'll hand it off. So next section is going to talk about, well, how to apply to graduate school.
Yeah. So I'll be talking a little bit about how to apply to grad school, what kind of documents you might need, what you might need to prepare. If you could move on. Okay. So there are essentially 4 components to an application. The first is your CV, which is a kind of a longer version of your resume. It lists your credentials and your experience. The second part is your statement of purpose. That's kind of like an essay where you say what you want to do in grad school, what you want to study, what you want to accomplish, and kind of what your relevant backgrounds might be. And then the third component is your letters of recommendation. Schools typically accept 3 to 4 letters from researchers or professors or anyone that knows you well. And the fourth component is your test scores, such as the GRE, TOEFL, anything that a school might want you to submit. So what is a CV? CV is essentially a document that compiles your research experience, your publications, abstracts, posters, anything you've presented, as well as your technical internships, long-term projects, jobs that you might have held, fellowships and awards that you might have received, as well as academic service, volunteering, mentoring, TAing. So basically, a brief overview on who you are and what you have done. Things you might not want to include are semester long or shorter projects, things that may have just done in class, as well as some personal information. They can be anywhere between 2 to 3 pages. There's not really a page limit, but you don't want it to be too long. They're a little bit more detailed than a resume because you have the space to put things down. And make sure that the formatting is consistent throughout the document. It's clear, it's concise. Someone gives a quick overview or a quick glance at it, they can get the key concepts. I'm good with this. So what is your statement of purpose? Again, it's kind of a 2 to 3 page essay on just what you want to do, what you want to study, who you are as a researcher. So some of the things that you should include are what problems you're interested in exploring. So, what areas of research you're interested, why you're interested in that kind of research. Who you want to work with is a big one. When you're applying to each of the academic institutions, it's kind of a good idea to write down 2 or 3 names on what their research, why their research is relevant to yours, and what you can bring to the table. So you also want to say what resources the program has that you will benefit and how you will contribute to that program. And also the big thing is why you are qualified to tackle these problems, give these resources, use these resources and give back to them.
There's a bit of a lag, just to let you know. So.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I was like, yeah, that's totally fine. And so great statement of purpose is just how you've experienced shape, how your experience has shaped what you aspire to do. So these are the 3 questions that you might want to think about while writing them. So how your experience has shaped you, what are your short and longer term goals? So, what you want to accomplish maybe at the institution and then what you want to do after, and how do you plan to give back to the community is a big one. Don't just copy and paste your CV. There's a reason why we're submitting 2. It's kind of a way for you to elaborate off of them, or kind of talk about the things that your CV doesn't. There are several resources, online resources to help you with writing your statement of purposes. So we listed a couple, there's more out there, but yeah.
Cool. So I'll take over here. We'll be discussing letter of recommendations. Overall, these are basically strong letters or letters from people who have worked with you, who can talk about like how you approach research, how you approach working with others. Typically, strong letters of recommendation come from your research advisors, but they can also come from other people. For example, those you've worked with at internships and professors you have TA'd with. You can get some letters of recommendations from people you haven't worked with, but that's generally not recommended. So it is possible to get letters of rec from professors you've just taken their class with, but generally we want to avoid that. In general, as mentioned earlier, you want 2 to 4 letters of recommendation. For an undergrad, that's really, really hard to get 3 or 4 strong letters of rec. I personally don't know anyone when I was applying who had 3 strong letters of recommendation. So typically you have 1, which is the professor you've been doing research with, maybe 2 if you're lucky, and then 3 or 4, you kind of try to get the best you can get. So don't be worried if you can't get 3 strong ones, but you definitely want to have at least 1 strong one. So there are a few tips that you can do to help your letter writers write good letters. So first of all, reach well in advance. They should know ahead of time that you're applying for grad school and you want a letter of recommendation. But additionally, you can provide supporting material. This is particularly important if you have not personally had a lot of face time with the letter of recommendation. So for example, in undergrad, I worked with a PhD primarily, and then asked for a letter of recommendation from the professor. So in those scenarios, you definitely do want to send supporting material describing what you've done. If your PhD student you've been working with can also provide supporting help, that definitely can improve your recommendation. Cool. So in addition to applying for PhD programs, you definitely want to look into fellowships. Some of them can be applied, or actually most of them can be applied during your PhD, but it definitely helps to apply earlier if possible. So unfortunately, or fortunately, if you're a US citizen, there are fellowships that you can apply for. These do help a lot in terms of increasing your flexibility in who you can match with. So for example, if you do get that first fellowship listed right there, NSF, you become roughly like 70% cheaper. So that really opens up a lot of universities and professors who would be more willing to take you because they don't need to pay as much. And lastly, I think nowadays fellowships affiliated with companies are getting kind of more and more attention. And I definitely encourage you to explore. There are a lot of random ones that pop up, so it's not as simple as just Googling. You do need to, look into it a bit. So hopefully you want to apply for a PhD program. That's why you're here. The question is, how do you find a program? There are high-level questions about what universities you want to apply to, but in addition, you also want to figure out just typically 3 or 4 professors you'd be interested to be working with at that university. When I applied, I actually made a specific list. I went to university faculty websites, I scrolled and I looked at whoever I saw was interesting, and then you do mention this in your statement of purpose, for example, that this is who I'd want to work with, and this is why I think it would be cool to work with them, and also the other way around of why I think like they would want to work with me. So I do think it's important for you to really spend some quality time here and figure out who you would find interesting, but likewise, who would find you interesting. Should you email professors is a typically asked question. It does depend. Honestly, I think most professors are quite booked in terms of the number of emails, so they might miss it. But there are a few professors, especially if they're new, who are actively looking for students, and in that case, it might be worth emailing. So you can check out that link for more information. Applications are not cheap, to say the least. They're not particularly expensive sometimes, but they're not cheap. You should definitely look into application fee waivers. That really depends per group. But if you can kind of qualify for one of them, it definitely helps. So you should definitely look into seeing if you can apply fee waivers. If the fee is also a concern, you can email the specific universities, and usually they're quite helpful in getting around that. So now we're going to dive into like what is grad school like from a PhD student's perspective, to give you a real feel of what it is, other than this abstract concept that you may have heard of before. In particular, we're going to talk about like our individual lives. Oops, I skipped ahead of one slide. My bad. So before we go into that, there's a big difference between US and international programs. In the US, you apply for a specific program, not for a specific project. In the US, typically you are fully funded by the university and by the lab. Additionally, one difference is our length is 5 to 6 years. This is typically, I think, a little longer than some other PhD programs, for example, in Australia, that are usually like 3 years. Part of that is we don't require a master's program or a master's degree when applying to a PhD. So several people come straight from their undergrad. And additionally, one last point, I think this is true in the US, but also everywhere, like across different countries, your experience will vary based off of the particular place you're at. So this is a slide I jumped ahead of, a day in our lives of research. So this is my virtual day. I wake up a little early, around 8:30, have breakfast, read the news. I try to do a little bit of coding. Then I have Zoom research meetings with lab mates. So that's one of my lab mates who thinks he's kind of funny. Then I have lunch. I have a lot of undergrads that I'm working with. And that's actually an experience I've really enjoyed, which is instead of doing research by myself, I have a team of people who I am working with that I think really makes it more enjoyable. So when you're debugging your code, you're not debugging it by yourself, but you're debugging it with other people. Afterwards, try to read a paper. And for fun, I really enjoy board games. So I try to play as many as I can. So that was the typical day. This is like, if I get lucky, what can we do? So on the left is that same hoodie guy from earlier working on a real robot setup. He's trying to get it to plug in a port into a robot. In the middle is a bunch of board games. There's a board game club in CMU. On the right is some place an hour drive away that's pretty fun. And then on the bottom is our cohort. We had a hangout. I think we played some Frisbee. And on the right, one time I was just walking around campus and somebody with a spot robot was walking into the elevator. So I thought that was pretty cool.
This is my life in a day in a life. I usually try to wake up around 8, wake up, eat breakfast, run to the bus. Nice thing is that for students, the buses are free here in Pittsburgh. So it's a really convenient way for me to get to campus. 9 is when I go to the office, respond to emails, get my first coffee, respond to Slack messages, just write down my to-do list, get my life in order, my day in order, just, figure out what I'm going to do that day. 10 to 12, I try to read papers, work on my fellowship applications, do some research. And then from 12 to 1, I get lunch with friends in the common room. And then from 1 to 3, I take 2 classes right now. And so I either go to class, or if the days I don't have class, I have meetings with my advisor or meetings with other people, collaborators, and just time for me to just get out of the office and chat with people. 3 p.m. is my coffee break. NSH has 2 great coffee machines that I utilize. And I try to find some friends to go get coffee with, get up, walk around. 3:15-ish to 6, I do my homework or research. And then after that, for 2 hours-ish, I either go to the gym, hang out with friends. One of the pictures in there is when we went to a bouldering gym. There are 2 bouldering gyms, I think, that people at CMU go to. This is one of them. Or I'm on Club Swim, so I also go to that practice too. And then from 8 p.m. on, dinner, homework, TV, relax, call my parents, just kind of have some me time, and then do it all over again.
So one nice thing, at least about CMU, is that if you just have a casual group lunch, it ends up turning into a mini robot conference. So this is a picture 2 cohorts above. 1 or 2 of them have graduated. But what's really nice is that like somebody's working on robot planning, optimal control, human robot safety, off-road driving, just keeps on going. It almost covers basically like all the possible fields we can think of. This is typically true with just most academic experiences. Part of the fun part about being in academia is that a bunch of people around you are working on really cool things that you are generally interested in, but still sufficiently different that it's really fun talking to them. One nice thing about CMU in general is that we have a really big cohort, or big class size, a lot of PhD students, which also means that every time you go to a conference, there are a ton of people from CMU. So on the left is a group picture from ICRA, on the right was IROS, on the right is IROS, and in general, you can find plenty of CMU students at whichever robotics conference you're at. So now sort of goes into our pitch of why CMU. I think first and foremost, it's the top robotics program I would claim in the world. We have a ton of faculty, we have a ton of students, we have the breadth and depth that you want. If you think of any sort of robotics topic you're interested in, CMU will have at least one, if not several people working on it. Additionally, we have strong collaborations with industry. For example, a lot of stuff that is sent into the moon, or like rovers and all of that, is done at CMU. Additionally, we have a very great cost of living compared to other places. So our rent is cheap, our food is cheap, our buses are not bad. And then additionally, yeah, we have some health insurance that has recently been upgraded to free instead of costing money, and Pittsburgh is fun. Yeah, so basically we make roughly 38.4K. I think this has recently gotten a little increased, but an observation is basically all other universities, so MIT and Stanford, will roughly pay the same rate. But the concern though is if you want to live there, it costs a lot more. So we're basically making, like, in a way, twice as much as our peers would be. So it really, like, money is not a big concern in Pittsburgh. We are making enough money to live comfortably and have fun.
All right, so I guess we're at the frequently asked questions. So I guess
There's actually another slide after it. Yeah, it got
this one
placed in different. All right, yeah. So this is where I talk about risk, and then we will go back.
All right.
So before,
all right.
yeah. So before we go to the frequently asked questions, if you're an undergraduate right now, considering some graduate level research, or just what is research, or want to get your feet wet in research, RIS, Robotics Institute Summer Scholars Program, is a really great way for you to just kind of get introduced into the field. I was a RIS alum. I did it in 2021 and 2022. And so RIS is a 10-week summer paid research program that are kind of designed for juniors and seniors. Maybe you could apply if you're a sophomore. And so each student is paired with an advisor to conduct their own research. Before the program begins, students collaborate with their advisors to define the research objectives and identify available projects. And at the end of the summer, everyone will write and submit papers to the RIS working journals, which is a great way to get a publication out, and present their work through poster sessions, video recordings, and just various different ways to get your research out into the community. And through this, students will gain valuable experience in academic reading. So while you're doing research, one of the big things is academic reading, academic writing, and presentation of what your work is. And by the end of the summer, after the summer, scholars can keep working with their advisors to further their research. I know some of my peers have submitted to conferences after RIS because they kept working. And on top of research, RIS is pretty cool that you get to do a lot more than just research, which is also relevant to kind of grad school, because grad school, especially in a PhD program, you're not only doing research, but you're also doing some community engagement, speaking to peers and getting yourself out there in the community. So each member is expected to participate in at least one committee. One example is the journal team. So that team is in charge of making sure everyone submits their papers, the review process for each of the papers, as well as the visual design of the journal. And another team is the external marketing team, which was the one that I was on. And that focuses on community engagement. And one of the big accomplishments in our cohort was launching the RIS Instagram. So if you saw this on the Instagram, shout out to my cohort team. And we featured each of the scholars and their work, as well as the guest speakers. And the one thing about the guest speakers is the Robo launch brings in a bunch of guest speakers during the summer and sporadically throughout the year. And yeah, you get to hear about their work. And scholars are also split into groups where each week a group will organize an activity for the cohort to do. So one example is a kayaking trip or a trip to the zoo, and that gets people to step up in leadership positions. On their free time, scholars also go around Pittsburgh. So one of my favorite things during the summer is going to the Picklesburg Festival, and pickles aren't your thing. You can also go to Painting the Fence, which is a CMU tradition. And also out of this experience, you get a lot of friends, connections, and you're just immersed in the robotics community. You have a chance to interact with industries in Pittsburgh, other professors at CMU, and just wonderful people who can further your network, as well as just be good resources, mentors, peers. So if you're considering graduate school or considering graduate level research, RIS is a really great way to just step out into the field. And then, so RIS this year will be from June 1st to August 5th. So 10 weeks, and the applications will start in November 1st.
All right, now we're actually at the questions.
Yes.
Hopefully. All right.
Yes, we are.
All right, thank you all so much. I will moderate some questions, ask you guys the questions that we've gotten from the people watching and also from the form that we sent out. And feel free to answer questions that you feel like you have answers to. The first question that we've gotten in a few different formats is, how much research experience or background in research should I have before applying to these graduate programs, and how many publications are required?
I can take that. So it'll depend, right? So we highlighted at the beginning that there are different types of programs, so master's versus PhD, and there are different expectations in terms of where, you know, what are the pool of applicants, what do they bring in terms of research experience in each of these programs. So PhD is often a little bit more competitive, so we expect to have at least kind of delved into research during projects with one or multiple professors, whereas masters, maybe you have maybe some external projects, but it's not necessary to have a publication all the time in some of these programs. Even a PhD, though, it can be very different for different topics. So, for example, there's some topics where, you know, the expectation is that you know, maybe you need 2 or 3 publications, or at least that's what a lot of students that apply kind of bring to the table. And so you might be competing your application with other students that have a certain amount of experience. But other times, depending on the research topic, it might be, you know, a little bit more selective in terms of what their, you know, what the experience is like. So, for example, I know that in certain topics, students get admitted with 0 publications, but they might have research experience and other unique experience that they bring to the table that's appealing to a potential advisor. So you know, it's maybe not the easiest answer to give here, but it depends. It depends on the program. It depends on the field. It depends on who you would work with. But the thing to do is to really try to figure out, you know, how to stand out amongst the crowd and you know, present, you know, the type of experience that you have. Hopefully it's unique relative to your peers, and that helps you stick out amongst the crowd and maybe elevate your application a little bit for some of these programs. But of course, more publications is better, right?
Awesome, thanks. A related question is, how much do poor grades in undergrad affect PhD or master's admissions? What if I also have stronger research or better grades in a master's program?
I can take that as well. So grades aren't the end all. It's not the only factor. It is a factor. Certainly, you know, for initial kind of evaluation of applications, grades are sometimes used to kind of separate out, you know, the best from the worst, and, you know, see which applications deserve more attention. Typically, though, especially at CMU, we'll go through all the applications to see if there's, you know, any, you know, we don't want to automatically filter out, you know, a certain subset of applications based off of GPA. So we'll go through all of them. But certainly, if you have bad grades, it can be a little bit concerning. If you have, a few kind of outlier courses, then that's not as big of a concern. Frankly, grades at the end of the day doesn't matter as much as good experience, strong letters, good statement of purpose. These are the things that I think more important. Grades can sometimes can be potential red flags, but provided that they're good enough, then I don't think that they will make or break a particular application. At least that's my viewpoint on how to.
I mean, I will concur. I don't think grades will make or break an application. I think they're just a side note that help in the initial sorting, but don't matter much after that.
Yeah, after the initial. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was gonna say one tip that I received for when I was reading through some of the websites was that if you have a bad grade, if it's an outlier, sometimes there is a part in your SOP where you can state maybe there was something that happened or something. So there is a chance for you to explain why that might have happened. So.
Yeah, I'll echo that too. For example, I've read letters where it explained why, it was hard a particular year, something like that. And then, it basically provides the admission committee with enough material to understand kind of fully, who you are as a person. And so you hopefully shouldn't have to worry too much if, you have one outlier. It's not, the end of the story there.
Awesome. Thanks. Okay, maybe Rishi, you can take this one, but what should I do if I don't have enough letters of recommendation?
I did have a friend who ended up just asking a professor who he had a good grade with and said, can you write a rec letter? That is essentially throwing it away, but I do think it's hard for people to get 3 recommendation letters. So I would say just pick the best one. It's okay if they don't know you, but you should definitely have at least 2 people who know you.
Reina, maybe you can take this one. So as far as the statement of purpose goes, how general or specific should you get when you're talking about your area of research or like areas of research interest? With the additional question of, should you be more specific even if there isn't a current professor at the university doing the exact research that you want to do?
Yeah, so the statement of purpose is typically limited to 2 to 3 pages, depending on the school. So there is a page limit constraint. So you could start off with a big idea and then kind of narrow it down. The big thing is you can have an idea, but you also have to link on how or what experiences you have and what skill set you have that could help you with that when you're at an institution. So the biggest advice I can give for that is that you can make it really specific or you can make it really broad, but just make sure that you have, kind of show the committee that you have thought it through on why you think this idea would be good. Also, sorry. Also, another thing is, if you're writing 2 to 3 professors down for why you want to work with them, a good time is like kind of riff off of their research and be like, they have this kind of research. I have looked into them. This is a new idea or a connecting idea that I have brought to the table, which is a good way to show that you have kind of thought things through and that you have the skills and have the passion to connect their research with what you have done. And so that's kind of a broader general answer to, how specific you want to make your statement of purpose. It is kind of up to you and how you want to shape it. The page limit is one of the biggest, for me, that was the biggest thing was, you can make it really long and then you do have to cut things out. So it's up to you on what you want to cut out.
I'll also mention one other thing. So the statement of purpose can be looked at in a bunch of different ways. One thing that people look at is your communication skills. So if you write a statement of purpose where, it's confusing, it's hard to follow, maybe it's too technical, it may not come across as strongly. And so think about also, having a friend or family member read over your statement of purpose, make sure it's well written in addition to making sure it conveys, what you're excited about, what type of work you want to do, how is it connected to university or particular potential advisors over there. So writing a clear, concise statement of purpose is also really important.
All right, awesome. Another statement of purpose question that maybe Rishi, you want to share thoughts on is, what is the best way to talk about industry experience in a statement of purpose?
Maybe I'll defer to Reina or Matthew if they do have industry experience. I had a little bit, it was research, but not robotics research. I think my quick summary would be talk about the broader skills, not about what exactly you did. So in my case, I was doing some like quantitative trading research thingy, which is completely independent of robotics. But I said I learned how to analyze an open-ended question and evaluate different hypotheses and those sort of broader skills.
Yeah, I agree. I think focusing on the skills that you've learned, type of experience that you got from an industry position, those are the things that kind of we're trying to read into in terms of how to assess you as a candidate and trying to get a sense as to, will you be successful in a PhD program? Does it line up with someone else's interest? You have all the kind of the skill sets to actually kind of be successful if admitted.
All right, great. Matt, I think you would be good for answering this question. How early should I contact professors about working with them?
Early. So I already have many people kind of contacting me for letters in terms of working with them. That is maybe a slightly more complicated question. So some professors may not, unfortunately, if you try contacting them too early, hopefully they would, but sometimes they're just busy with emails and it's hard to stay on top of things. If you're interested in, once your application goes through and if you're admitted, then as early as possible, you can reach out to them and say, hey, I'm coming in, I'm admitted in the program, and I'm interested in working with you. Start up a conversation, and we can get started right away. That can happen even before that, but often, there's a process that needs to go through. The admissions process is not simply, hey, is this person going to be able to be an advisor? There's a more general question of, is this person going to be successful at this institution? Do they have the skills to kind of not just do research with this advisor, but kind of meet our expectations in terms of being able to teach, being able to write, being able to take courses in a bunch of different topics. And so it's often, it's not like you can reach out to an advisor and that's it. There's kind of an application process, an admission process that needs to be seen through before you actually officially start working with them. Sorry, I think I cut you off before you said the entire question, but hopefully that addresses.
No, you got it. That was great. All right. The next question, Reina or Rishi, whoever would like to take this. Can I apply to robotics programs with degrees outside of CS, electrical engineering, and mechanical engineering?
I can take this question. One of my favorite things about robotics is that it's a very it's a field where a lot of disciplines can come together. So I know people who come from various fields like biology. And the big thing is to show that when you apply to a school, you have some of the skill sets that can translate over into robotics. So some of the things might be like coding, or math skills. Some of those things you do need to have. So you don't need a CS or an EE or an ME degree. You can have something else just in your statement of purpose or in your coursework. You just need to be able to reflect that you have some of the skills that can translate over into robotics.
All right.
I'll say
awesome.
also having a degree outside of, CS or robotics also brings something unique to the table. So it's something that you can potentially kind of embrace in terms of making you kind of stand out in terms of having a very unique perspective on certain problems because of, by, coming from a different area entirely. It makes it makes an application interesting. And I know a lot of students that, have interesting backgrounds that people appreciate and love working with them for those reasons.
All right, awesome. The next question, Rishi, if you have thoughts on this, does having incremental work published in a less prestigious journal hurt my application?
Having something published in general helps. I'm not going to say it hurts. Now, of course, the implicit question is, does it help more to have a more impactful research published in a more impactful conference? I think the sort of obvious answer is like, for sure, if you can. But I would not be overly concerned. It really depends where you are, as what type of program you're applying for. In some cases, just getting a publication shows that you have the skills. Lots of times, at least in my personal experience as an undergrad, it's not like I had the ability to choose a project. The project more like is something that I was more or less assigned to. And it's more of my ability to see that through. So I think as long as you can leverage the, like, I did the best I could given what I had, and it made it still out there and is accepted by someone, I don't think you need to downweigh it that much.
All right, great. Next question is, when is it recommended to do a master's degree before applying to a PhD? I don't know if any of you have thoughts on that, or have done a master's, or have thought about doing a master's before you apply to the PhD.
I can give perspective. Oh, no, go ahead.
So I did do a master's before doing a PhD, in part because outside of the US, that's sometimes more normal to do. So I'm from Canada, for example, and often we do masters before actually doing a PhD, and that might be true elsewhere as well. It's if you feel uncertain, you don't feel like you're ready in terms of experience, if you don't feel as though you're sure that you want to dedicate 5 to 6 years of your life of hard work to a particular topic, and put your heart and soul into this work, then a master's is a good way to kind of feel out, is this really for me? It's less of a commitment, and bolsters your resume. For a PhD, you should be pretty convinced that, hey, this is not it's a commitment, and it's exciting, it's fun to do. But you have to be pretty sure that you want to do it.
Yeah, so the part I was going to say is that I came straight from undergrad, and one of the reasons that kind of made my decision to do a PhD instead of a master's was that I kind of had a good idea of what I wanted to do after my PhD. So one thing to consider is just, what are your long-term goals? You don't have to have one, but if you're kind of set on a long-term goal, it might be worth looking at which program best fits that goal.
All right, awesome. Okay, so back to SOP focused questions. How much of the statement of purpose should I focus on what I will do if I get in, and how much should I focus on things that I have already done?
I think it's a mix. I think you have to be able to say something that you will do and why your previous experience helps, right? So it's kind of it's a mix in a way of you're linking the two together. You're saying why the things you have done make a good background for things that you want to do.
Yeah, it's an example. If you do, I have all this experience, but I want to do something completely new, and I have this plan. It's less strong than tying things maybe a little more seamlessly through from your experience to kind of building off of that experience, and it lines up with the work from these people. working at this university. So I would stay a little bit, if it was a 2-page statement of purpose, I'd spend maybe a page and a paragraph focusing on skills, experiences, motivation, why you're excited, and then maybe 2/3 of the second page focusing on how it ties into type of research that's going on at a particular institution and why you're a good fit and who you'd like to work with.
Awesome. A question that we got that I don't know if we as Robotics Institute people really know the answer to is, are you aware if the machine learning department also does cohort-based admissions? Oh, never mind.
So I don't know, but I'll say this. Every department has its own process. So I'm not just part of robotics, I'm also CSD. And sometimes I get confused as to, the differences between the two in terms of how we kind of proceed with admissions. So you should look into every department kind of separately and maybe reach out to someone within that department to answer those types of questions.
All right, awesome. I'm going to pull a couple questions from our frequently asked questions since we have a little bit more time. So the question here is, what's more important in the application packet? The statement of purpose, letters of recommendation, grades and scores? What part of it?
I'm not 100% sure, but from what I have heard is it's a holistic view of just kind of it's your whole package. I'm not sure if Matt has more answers to it, but just from what I've heard.
So often we have a rubric to try to say, okay, well, we're looking for, motivation, experience, research potential, communication, and we're looking at all aspects of the application to see, okay, are they kind of meet the bar or exceed the bar in these different categories. So I think, letters are really important. Statement of purpose is really important. And grades, I think, it's useful to a degree, or GRE, TOEFL scores are useful to a degree to make sure that, hey, okay, this isn't someone that is going to struggle with writing, or speaking. There's a certain level of, where we want students to be at before they actually enter a graduate program. So those are, I think, less important. The big ones are the letters and statement of purpose and CV.
All right, awesome. And I think we can wrap up our session with one last question, which is, how do we know what faculty are looking for students?
I feel like, frankly, some of the faculty themselves don't know exactly because their funding is in the air. So having talked to some professors, it's like, yeah, we'll hire somewhere between 0 or 1 or 2, depending on if a grant comes in. That said, there are a few professors who definitely do know that they're hiring because they have a grant ready. And in those cases, they might even write it on their website saying looking for a prospective PhD student. So definitely look on their personal websites.
Yeah, I'll echo that. Check out their website. Sometimes there will be a note posted, but often it's undecided until you're looking through applications or you have funding available for a PhD program, for example, to support a student to do a particular type of research. So it's sometimes hard to know. You can try reaching out by email to maybe get a sense of are they looking, are they not, are they unsure? Sometimes it's hard to get a response, but often hopefully they'll say, provide, apply or don't apply. maybe they'll give you some advice that way. But their job is not to say, hey, you know, you're qualified, you're not qualified. Really the question is, you know, are you looking for students or you're not looking for students? That's what you should focus on, rather than asking them to say, hey, can I be admitted into your group? That's not exactly their job.
All right, great. I think that brings us to the end of this session. Thank you all so much for volunteering your time. And for everyone who's on the webinar and watching on YouTube, if you have other questions that crop up, we're holding one last webinar session on Friday at 1 p.m. Eastern. You can continue to send us questions on the Google form on our website, and all of these slides, recordings of this, all of it will be on the internet. Thank you all.